My wife is in labor. My wife is in labor. Where are the hospital?
Hospital.
Doctor.
Help us.
Doctor. No, I beg. My wife is in labor. I beg. My wife want to. I beg. I beg. I beg.
Not you. I recognize you. The same man who ganged up all the youth in the community to drive away all the tax officers in our community. You put a halt to the sustainable caste culture that has been laid in place in our community.
I beg.
See now, the community hospital is already locked down.
Now I have the money. I can pay the money now.
You refuse to pay your tax.
I beg.
The hospital is locked up.
I can pay. My wife is in labor. My wife is in labor.
When we say pay your tax, when the government say pay your tax, it is for sustainable culture to keep up with all that needs to be done in the community.
Okay, let me rush out to another place.
It is too late.
Let me rush out to another place.
Take out of the city. Take out of where they pay tax. That is if the road is good enough for you to follow.
You cannot have any economic development either in developing nations or developed nations without tax revenue.
When taxpayers see the results of what they are paying, they are willing to pay, even when it is painful. Because paying of taxes is not easy. It requires you giving some level of commitment to fulfilling your own civic responsibilities.
It was a 4-day activity-packed event, the 26th in the series of annual tax conferences of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, CITN. The biggest gathering of tax practitioners and tax administrators, leading lights in the Nigerian economic space and beyond. The conference had in attendance the who is who in Nigeria. The Governor of Sokoto State, His Excellency Ahmad Aliyu Sokoto, the Governor of Borno State represented by the Deputy Governor Alhaji Omar Osman Kadafo, the former Governor of Ogun State, Senator Ibikunle Amosun, the Accountant General of the Federation, Dr. Oluwatoyin Madeyin, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, Mrs. Adejoke Orelope Adefulire, the Emir of Dutse, His Royal Highness Muhammad Hamid Nuhu Sanusi, former Executive Chairman of FRS, Mr. Babatunde Fowler, Executive Chairman of FRS, Dr. Zacchaeus Adedeji, Executive Chairman of State Boards of Internal Revenue Services, past Presidents of the CITN, the 16th President of the CITN and his ESCO members, Council members of the Institute, Captains of Industry, leading lights in the taxation industry, and so on and so on. It was an avenue to brainstorm on burning issues regarding the tax system in Nigeria, as well as other economic matters. The theme of the 26th Annual Tax Conference of the CITN was Sustainable Tax Culture and Economic Roadmap for Nation Building.
In selecting the theme of the 26th Annual Tax Conference, what was growing through the mind of this institute was the fact that in the face of dwindling oil revenue and various social and economic challenges, sustainable fiscal financing through taxation is the only viable option for the country. The emphasis on sustainable is deliberate. We understand that for Nigeria to achieve meaningful fiscal development over the long term, it is imperative to establish a tax culture that can withstand economic fluctuations and challenges.
Till today, CITN has been committed to ensuring that members are equipped with the knowledge and skill needed to build an effective and efficient tax system in the country. Our efforts have not reduced or ceased. Today, we have converged for the 26th time, tax experts from across Nigeria and beyond, to critically examine the challenges of Nigeria's fiscal tax environment with a view to providing solutions for consideration of policymakers in this regard. Sustainable tax culture and economic roadmap for nation building. It cannot be reiterated enough. Taxation is not merely about revenue collection. It is about building a sustainable future for our country. It is about creating a future where every citizen understands the importance of contributing his or her own fair share towards national development. It is more importantly about prudently using tax policies as a roadmap to drive economic growth, social inclusiveness, and prosperity for all.
The conference began with an hospitality night to welcome conference delegates, featuring presentations by different district societies of the CITN, which centered on the theme of the conference.
I don't tire, I must japa. Japa, japa, japa. I don't tire, I must japa. Hey, my husband again on this japa matter. What is it? I've discussed it severally. You will not japa, please. You will not japa. No, see, let me tell you, the taxes in this country has become too much. Let me tell you, just in 2020, they increased VAT from 5% to 7.5%. It is too much. I must japa from this country. I must japa.
You mean you want to leave every example? How are you doing? What is this brew about you want to japa? Your wife called me that you said you want to japa. What's happening?
The multiple taxation in Nigeria is
multiple taxation, my friend?
Yes, of course.
Are you not aware of the Presidential Tax Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms headed by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele?
You don't mean it?
Yes, my friend, they are harmonizing all the tax policies.
Wow.
As soon as in this economy, we will sleep with our eyes closed on tax issues. And I need to advise you, my friend, you need to also engage the services of a tax consultant to help you in your tax matters. Don't jump from your country. Don't jump, don't give up. Don't jump, don't evade tax. Together we build our nation.
Tuesday, 14th May 2024 was the beginning of the intellectual feast, which began with the lead paper presentation on the theme of the conference.
Tax culture is all about citizens' attitude on the one hand, and then their behavior with respect to tax compliance. Two important things: attitude. I always put it simply as what is on the inside. Those are thoughts, considerations, the thinking about tax compliance. Then behavior is the actual conduct. In which case, how do we develop a culture where both the thinking and then the conduct of people align with tax compliance as a duty, not as something you need to be motivated to do. Now, coming to tax culture, and I think that is what we are dealing with this morning. There are 4 questions that occur to me we should address this morning. Number 1, why won't citizens voluntarily comply with tax regulations? Secondly, why do governments tend to place tax as revenue source ahead of tax as business facilitator? Thirdly, why do government tax officials seek opportunities to collude with taxpayers to avoid or evade tax payment? And the 4th question that occurred to me is this: why do governments not always emphasize value for money in utilizing tax revenue?
If we are going to improve the tax culture in Nigeria, the following need to happen. Number 1, improve transparency in government's fiscal operations. In which case, whatever government is spending money on, if people can see the value, then there is the tendency for them to want to put more money in the hand of government. Every citizen has a part to play in the tax culture. That's number 1. Secondly, the issue of compliance with tax regulations is not about what they are doing with my money. It is actually about me. Am I compliant as a citizen? If I own a business, is my business compliant? So in every sphere of the taxation ecosystem, am I compliant? In which case, I shouldn't find an excuse in either my friend or my neighbor not comply, or in the fact that, oh, there is no social compact. I don't know what government is doing with the money. I would rather do what is expected of me and then let every other person or entity carry their own kind. This, for me, is the cornerstone of a recalibrated tax culture that will drive voluntary compliance, because that's where we are going to. Voluntary compliance, and then change the narrative about the effectiveness of the tax system in Nigeria and beyond.
Where do we go from here? We have to creatively design something that is fit for purpose. The current reform will do so much, but it is now the responsibility of stakeholders to now come up with a design that will address the issues more fundamentally. So we need to not even think out of the box. We need to think without even seeing any box. And we also need to know that technology will change the way we do things. There are things taking hours, days, months, that technology will just fix seamlessly. But we must invest in the right technology. This phone is a fiscal wonder. That is the platform where many tax authorities are operating. In the homes of people, in their business spaces, and they're making the life of everyone serious.
Invited guests and other distinguished individuals were given the opportunity to lend their voices to the issues at hand.
Taxation, as we all know, has since time immemorial been the major source through which sustained governments were able to raise money which to carry out projects for the overall development of their various communities.
The taxpayers, the tax authorities, and the tax system. There's a need to understand each component, how they interact with one another, and how this relationship is impacted by the social environment. Pursuant to this approach, the rationale behind taxation, the principles of taxation, and the status of the Nigerian tax system in comparison to the principles of taxation will be highlighted. Lastly, and constraints and challenges of the Nigerian tax system will be identified to determine the impact not only on the tax culture, but also economic development and nation building.
And from the #1 taxman in Nigeria.
When you see overtaxation, when you see multiplicity, it means something is missing. Mr. President said, Zach, go and tax prosperity, go and tax profit, go and tax the fruit, not the seed, not investment, and not the poverty. So my duty as a Federal Revenue Service is not to impose taxes. It's just to share part of your prosperity. And that is why it is when you are prosper, most especially manufacturer, that is when I'm happy. So I'm not a law enforcement agent. I try to say that I am your partner in progress. Because it is when you have 10, I can have 3. If you have 20, I will have 6. If you have 30, I will have 18. So our aim at the service is actually to continue to increase the growth, not only of manufacturing, of all the sectors. We, most especially at the service, we are your partner. Because your prosperity is our prosperity, and by extension, the prosperity of the country.
To further dissect the theme of the 26th Annual Tax Conference, there were panel sessions. The first panel session was on critical assessment of revenue generation at Subnational.
There is no state in Nigeria that is not viable. And until when all the states are completely independent of the federal government, that they don't have to run cap in hand every month to go and be waiting for FAC, we will continue to have the low revenue generation. We will continue to have the problem that has bedeviled us as we speak. Let me say this again, and that's why I said there is no state that is not viable. The only thing to do is for states to look at areas where they have comparative advantage and work on it. And lo and behold, they will increase their IGR.
when you look at the internally generated revenue, only 2 states in Nigeria and Federal Capital Territory generate up to 50% of their total revenue internally. Lagos State on the average generates about 80%, Ogun State about 70%, and Federal Capital about 60%, right? The rest is below 50%. What is that telling us? That says there is scope for us to increase IGR. But having said that also, I must also sound a note of warning. There is no subnational, right, that can achieve sustainable growth, right, by higher taxes. All you need to do is to focus, on, closing the loopholes in the tax laws within your state, and try as much as possible to introduce policies that are pro-growth.
On Wednesday, 15th May 2024, the intellectual feast continued.
We've gotten to that point where everybody seems to say, my point of view is the most superior. Government wants revenue. Taxpayer is complaining, all right? And there are limited choices, other than tax revenue. But how do we collect responsibly? How do we simplify the process? How do we lessen the burden? And how does government, more importantly, recognize the fact that there are other levers that are more within the government that it needs to pull before putting more pressure on revenue generation? Like, for example, the spending power is that of the government. If we have limited headroom from much more that we can make, how do we streamline and how do we optimize the spending? How do we ensure that what is available is channeled towards, critical infrastructure? How do we reduce non-debt service, recurrent expenditure? How do we block leakages? And I think those are all of the levers that need to be put together, and the populace will be a lot more receptive to the changes that is happening, because the belt tightening is not only happening from a taxpayer's perspective, it's also happening from a government side.
So now, we wonder, is our tax rate low? Is our GDP very high? Why are our collections low? What are we doing wrongly?
We need to balance revenue objective with growth objective. Because if we don't grow the economy, ultimately revenue will be adversely affected. And we need to grow the economy to create jobs, to reduce poverty, and all of that. So while it is good to raise revenue, we need also to ensure that we pay equal and very important attention to issues of growth. And the manufacturing sector is a major driver of economic growth. So we need to take it easy and slowly for them.
Still on Wednesday and still on the intellectual lane, there was a national tax quiz competition among tertiary institutions.
So over to you, University of Ilorin. The question is, taxes administered by states governments include the following except A, value-added tax, B, personal income tax, C, stamp duty, D, capital gain. Your time starts now.
A, value-added tax.
A is the correct answer. Redeemer University.
Question 37.
When there is a deadlock on taxpayers' objection, the tax assessment is put in A, abeyance, B, on hold, C, A and B above, D, stalemate. Your answer?
C, A and B above.
I'm sorry to announce to you that it's incorrect. The right answer is A.
It was, however, not entirely an academic exercise. There was the opportunity to relax, exercise, and ease off the loads of intellectual engagements. And to round off the 26th Annual Tax Conference of the CITN was the Gala Night, a night of glitz and glamour, a night to unwind and enjoy. It was an occasion to recognize and confer awards on sponsors of the 26th Annual Tax Conference, as well as the winners of the National Tax Quiz Competition and district societies for their outstanding performance. It was a night of celebration. We leave you with sights and sounds from the event.
Okay. Baba. Sir, person you want no person, now you the good person. Originally, if you want no person, you know the boss person.
Eledami mo diemu, mo diemu. Eledami mo diemu. Èmi ò gbọ́dọ̀ jábọ́, mo wá dúpẹ́ oore yàná. Bàbá mo dúpẹ́, mo wá dúpẹ́ oore mi. Bàbá mo dúpẹ́.
More from the 26th Annual Tax Conference are coming your way.